Figure that out. So while we're waiting for Alex to rejoin us, I would like to take a moment to interview our moderator today. She is Erin Huber-Rosen. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Oh, good. She is the executive director and founder of an organization called Drink Local, Drink Tap. And she founded that organization 10 years ago. And we're very pleased that she has said yes to moderating this panel. So Erin, I will pass it along to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Good morning from Cleveland and good afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining from, and welcome to this panel. Freshwater continues to be a challenge for people across the globe, either in terms of access or safety. This health equity problem will be discussed today by experts leading change in several of our sister cities. With Cleveland sitting on one of the largest networks of fresh water in the world, this session will show how cities that are water rich and water poor are making a future for their residents. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Sister Cities Conference sponsors: Platform Brewery, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Supply Side Group, Ulmer and Byrne, Rotary Club of Cleveland, Eaton, Taiwan Sister Cities, SIP USA, Margaret Wong and Associates, Team Neo, Peace Corps, and 12 Literary Arts. I'll just take a brief moment to introduce myself and my professional background. 10 years ago, I started Drink Local, Drink Tap right here in Cleveland, sitting on 20% of the world's fresh surface water. Now, 10 years later, I find myself both working in Cleveland and the US, but also in East Africa in the Great Lakes region of the world, there. The big stark difference that I see constantly in my work between two continents is the access to clean water. And over the last decade, I've started to notice some very stark differences in freshwater issues. Climate change expresses itself through water. You either have too much, too little, or too dirty when climate change starts interfering with our water supplies and systems. Living in the land of plenty in Cleveland, I have been really rich my entire life. And working in East Africa on the equator, in these equatorial regions, these communities are facing a lot of extended drought, too little water, too much water sometimes from the rain, washing away their farming and seeds and livelihoods. So I've started to see quite a change in parts of the world that are different from here. Today on our panel, you'll be hearing from experts from around the globe and their relationship with water in the cities that they work in, research in, and live. I'm excited to learn with all of you today. Joining us soon is Alex Margevicus, Commissioner of Cleveland Water in Cleveland, Ohio, the United States. He basically provides my drinking water. Boris Ochoa Takachi, postdoctoral researcher at Imperial College London, Peru, now living in Ecuador. Polana Pengel at Revivo Institute for Ichthyological and Ecological Research in Slovenia. And Rembe Noon, CEO of Afiki Maim from the Valley of Springs in Israel. We were going to start our case studies today with the commissioner in Cleveland, but if it's okay with you, Boris, I'd love to move to you first, and you can share some of your learnings with us.
Perfect.
Are you trying to share your screen?
You can share your screen by clicking on the little computer monitor under the panelists, and then you can share your screen.
The commissioner just joined this session, so I was.
Yes, he did.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Boris Ochoa-Tokachi. I'm a research associate at Imperial College London, and we work in this project called Natural Infrastructure Security with a few partners that you can see here, including the funding of the U.S. Agency for International Development. Our project works in Peru, and Lima, being one of the sister cities of Cleveland, is an interesting case study. So the project has the national scope, but we focus on very specific cases as learning sites, because we think that those are the ones in which we can have the highest impact. But the idea is to generate evidence, to generate models, and to generate data that can later be used to mainstream investments in natural infrastructure for water security. So why Lima? If you check on some of the data of Lima, Lima is a metro area of 12 million people. It is a very dense city. It is at sea level, so it is really prone to flooding, for example. But at the time, the city is the second largest desert city in the world after Cairo in Egypt. And this contrasts with the communities that live in the mountains. These communities are relatively small. They have, for example, 1,000 people, like the community in Guamantanga that we are going for details after. And they have lots of water because they receive all the moisture that is coming from the Amazon that is blocked by the Andes Mountains. And then this water will flow in the rivers that reach metropolis like Lima. So there is a very strong seasonality in the water that comes in the mountains. For example, these pictures were taken in the same place. One was taken in December during the wet season, and the other was taken in the next April during the dry season. And you can see that there is a stark contrast between these two pictures and being the same place. So this extreme seasonality is for water scarcity in several places that depend on the water that comes from the mountain. And this combined with climate change is going to be a huge issue. But downstream, what this produces are effects like this. There is flooding during the wet season when we have excess rainfall, or there is drought or very long dry seasons when we don't have any rainfall. So these consequences from the upstream will translate for cities like Lima in very extreme natural disasters like this. So the situation in Lima is that Lima depends on the water of 4 rivers: the Tzion, Rimac, and Lurin, that are rivers that come from the mountains to the Pacific Ocean, and the Mantaro River that goes actually to the Amazon. So naturally, the problem is exactly, I love the title of this session. The problem is that too much water during the short rainy season. We have too little water during the long dry season. So the rainy season lasts 3-4 months, and the dry season lasts for 7-8 months. And the water that we have during the dry season is not enough to cope with the water demand of the city. So the response, of course, is to make some water transfers from the Amazon where there is excess water. And these account for a total of 330 million cubic meters of storage capacity for the city. And still, there is a deficit of 43 million cubic meters of water during the dry season. So to put, and this is just a complex network of different types of gray infrastructure, different reservoirs, different pipes, different tunnels. This is one of the most human managed basins in particular. This is the most managed in Peru. So to put that number in context, the 330 million cubic meters of storage capacity in Lima, an Olympic pool has dimensions of 50-meter long, 25-meter wide, 2-meter deep, which is 2,500 cubic meters. So the capacity of storage in Lima is not 1,000 or 2,000 Olympic pools. It accounts for 132,000 Olympic pools. So that is a huge number. But for the population that Lima has, that is less than 35 cubic meters per person per year. And compared with other cities in the world, even with other Latin American cities, this is just not enough. So there is not enough water in the system in order to cope with the city water demand. So what we do is we think how we can develop infrastructure to cope with that water demand. So there is the gray infrastructure, of course, what we talked about, the reservoirs, canals, tunnels, and so on. There is what this is called green infrastructure that you've heard about, some of these strategically planned natural spaces that can also provide services similar to gray infrastructure, but actually this will look something like this. Really infrastructure is a combination of these two approaches. There is this concept of blue infrastructure that is more dealing with water issues. There is this particular example that I'm going to talk with this rural technology, and this is what we call built infrastructure. And there is also this other group that we call natural infrastructure, which is how we can explore the potential of ecosystems as an infrastructure for water security. So natural infrastructure works as a type of infrastructure using mainly two ecosystem services. The first is the water yield, which is the factory. How much water can an ecosystem produce? How much of the rainfall is actually transformed into river flow? And the other is the hydrological regulation, which is the sponge, which means how long the water will stay in the ecosystem before it becomes river flow. So these concepts were very intelligently managed by local communities, and they developed these artificial infiltration systems. And one of the most interesting is an artificial infiltration system that has been in operation since pre-Inca times, 1,400 years old approximately. This system is called amunas, which for Quechua language means holding the water, or mamanteo for Spanish it means breastfeeding. And the idea of this system is really to use the water, and it is very embedded into the cultural practice of the communities to capture as much water during the wet season and use that water during the dry season. So the system is very interesting, very intelligent. So if you see from the right part of the screen, they take the water during the wet season, they divert the water from streams using canals, they let the water infiltrate in the soils, and they actually use the soils as natural reservoirs of water. So the water will travel much slower throughout the soil than it does over the surface. And that delay time allows them to have water during the dry season. So this actually creates a bridge between the wet season when they have rainfall to the dry season when they don't have any water available. So we tested, because this is a very small system. So we tested what is the potential to really extrapolate to
Boris, I'm sorry we've lost you a little bit. You froze.
Perhaps we could go to someone else and then maybe cycle back to Boris.
Sounds good. Boris, hold that thought. We're going to go ahead and move on to our commissioner of Cleveland Water here in Cleveland.
Morning, Erin. How are you?
Morning. Good. How are you?
Good. Sorry for those technical delays there.
That's okay. That's okay. We had introduced the topic of sharing a case study, learnings, a little background information about where we are and how we're managing our water.
Okay. Here in Cleveland, a little bit different story. Looking right out my window here at a gorgeous Lake Erie. Great Lakes has 20% of the world's fresh water. So we are blessed here with more than enough water. Generally speaking, water quantity is not so much an issue, but it is interesting. 25 years ago, when I was newer here, we didn't give a second thought to our source. In the drinking water business, we talk about there are three main things we think about: source, treatment, and distribution. And we put a lot of focus on treatment. We put a lot of focus on distribution, but not so much on source here. We took Lake Erie for granted. Not so much anymore. 2014, you may remember, algal blooms put the city of Toledo, Ohio, out of water for 3 whole days, and was a watershed moment in the drinking water industry here in the United States. We think far more differently about source. Even before then, we've been doing a lot more science and understanding of what goes on in Lake Erie. As a related issue to algal toxins that happen that we watch very closely is the concept of the dead zone in Lake Erie, as biological matter in the lake, including algae, settles to the bottom of the lake. It consumes the oxygen at the bottom of the lake. It loses its oxygen. And one of the things that can happen when water gets very low in oxygen level, when it becomes hypoxic, it has a tendency to pull up metals from the bottom of the lake, manganese and iron in particular. And the last 2 falls, we've had incidents of high manganese levels coming into our treatment plants. And it leads to aesthetic problems, if nothing else. It leads to discolored water incidents that occur as a result. So we do an awful lot of research now. We have buoys that we've deployed out into the lake that monitor during the summer season what's going on with algae levels, with oxygen levels, with pH, with water temperature, all to give us a better understanding. I have been constantly surprised at the complexity, the biology, the physics, the chemistry of Lake Erie, of what goes on out there. Far more nuance and complexity than we ever knew before. We partner with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, on doing modeling. They do algal bloom toxins for Lake Erie now that we monitor very closely during the season. And we've partnered with them, and they are now producing dead zone models. Last year and this year were really the first 2. And it's another predictive tool that we have. We're looking to continue to expand. We'll be probably putting even more buoys out into the lake next year to help us understand better what's going on with Lake Erie. So here, I guess it's more about quality as opposed to quantity regarding what's going on with the lake. Cleveland is a Rust Belt city. It's an older community. It is a community where we peaked in population 60, 70 years ago, and the region has seen some decline in population. And we have infrastructure that was built for 50 years ago. We have a lot of transmission mains, for example, that were designed to feed large steel mills and such. And some of them have more capacity than what's needed anymore. So how we manage that. We did major renovation at the water treatment plants a few years ago. We actually downsized them a little bit. It wasn't worth to overinvest in infrastructure like that. So trying to match what's going on with demand-wise is something that's been important to us. So those are a couple of the issues, I guess, Erin, that we think about a lot these days.
Sure, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'll definitely have some follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
I'd love to move on to, I don't think Boris is totally back with us yet, so why don't we move to Polona?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and hello and greetings from Slovenia. It's very sunny today here. So I'm going to share with you a presentation. It's just 3-4 small slides so that you can imagine what I'm presenting better. And so to set the scene, Slovenia is a tiny country with a population of 2 million in the Central South Europe. And if you don't know about us yet, you should Google it afterwards because it's really beautiful. And Slovenia is considered a water-rich country, which means that we get a lot of rain and enough snow during the winter so that it fills our rivers and streams, which are many around the country. But even so, we are facing increasing water shortages, and you may ask yourself, how come if you have so much water? But it's actually very simple. So originally Slovenia was covered in forest, but during the 19th century, we cut all the trees, and so there's not really any vegetation cover left to protect us from bad weather, from extreme weather conditions. And so we're now facing increasing water shortages because we also build up our floodplains and built our cities. We urbanized these areas, and because of that, the cities got flooded. And because the cities got flooded, we channelized our rivers. And ta-dam, now we have channelized rivers, and we have successfully destroyed them. And these are basically the veins of our land. They retain the water in the system, they're preventing flooding. And so the result is obviously that we get flooded more and more. But at the same time, this is really strange. If you don't know the system, we're also facing increasing water shortages because we're sending every inch of rain straight to the sea. And so now we have this situation that we want to remedy, and we want to fight increasing water shortages at the same time as we want to solve the problem of flooding. And the idea is to actually go a step back, to go back to nature-based solutions. And nature-based solutions, they are basically just using natural areas with natural functions to provide some protection, to give some room for natural functions, which nature is providing for us without us ever having to do anything. So, for example, the floodplains, they are filtering and storing water, they are buffering the flood waters and so on. But for them to be able to do this, we need to give them some room. And so we did this project in a catchment that the river of this catchment often floods the city center of Ljubljana. Ljubljana otherwise has several rivers, but we chose this one because the whole catchment is within the borders of the municipalities, so we didn't have a problem of coordinating multiple municipalities. But what we did here, we developed flood risk management plan based in nature-based solutions. So how can we use nature to protect us from flooding, but at the same time, how can we use natural water retention capacities of this catchment to allow or to prevent water shortages during summer, because due to the climate change, the summer shortages are getting increasingly important and impacting the different activities that we do in the catchment. However, the nature-based solutions are very well known around the world by now. The problem is because people don't know them yet. And so we had a lot of opposition from different areas within the catchment, from these different stakeholders. And so this, instead of going backwards, we decided to just say, okay, so let's get everybody together. We contacted basically from the mayor, national institutions responsible for water management, civil protection services. We went to individual farmers. We visited and invited the residents of the area that gets flooded. Basically everyone that can be affected or can contribute to flood risk management in the catchment. And together with them, we discussed how we can do this, which measures and where to put them. They were basically included in the whole process of developing this plan. And in the end, this really proved very successful because the stakeholders approved the final suggestion that we came up with together with them. And some of them even took this as a source for their future engagement, as a strategy that they could follow in the Glinščica catchment. And I think this was the most important learning from our case study for Ljubljana, that if you include the people during the process of development of some plan or strategy, in the end, you will be successful. And that's, for now, I guess this was what I wanted to present. And if you have any questions, we will, I guess, discuss later.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, eye-opening, and I commend you for your stakeholder engagement. I'd love to talk more about that later. If we can move, if we can move now to Ran Ben-Nun in Israel. Thank you.
Good morning to all. Here is afternoon already. Israel is a land of contrast. We don't have one country actually. Part of it have too much, not really too much water, but a lot of parts is too little, and too dirty. With us is it advantage, and we'll explain. If I go specifically to our region, to the Beit Valley, we are in the center of the Jordan Valley in Israel. Where I am sitting now is 200 meters below sea level. Below sea level. The Jordan River near to us is 300 meters below sea level. The water of our region, specific regions, is basically about not surface water, not a lot of rain, but most of the waters come from springs or from wells that we go take directly from the aquifer. Because we are so deep, naturally the water comes to us. If the rains go on the high mountains of the Samaria and Jerusalem and the Golan and the Galil, it's go down to the deep area, so it go to us. So we have a lot of springs. Specifically in Israel, we have a lot of water, not too much, but we have a lot of water. We don't suffer from a lake of water. We suffer from the quality of the water. The water that go up in the springs is very salty because of the Dead Sea is very salty, and it's all influence in the surrounding. So we have wells that take the water directly from the aquifer, and this is very sweet and very fitted for drinking water. So we don't have a lake of drinking water. We have enough drinking water. Most of the water, 80% of the water, is salty water, and they can use just for agriculture and not for to suitable agriculture, not everything. So in our area, specifically in Beit Shan, we have another problems for all other regions in Israel. The climate changes don't influence us directly so much in our area. What mostly influence this area is, you can say, too much. It's never too much population. In all the area from the desert to the Mediterranean Sea, a lot of millions of people, never in the history so much people. So even the same quantity of water don't enough for everything. As I explained, specifically in Beit Shan Valley, because we are so deep, the water comes naturally to us, so we don't suffer from it directly. And we don't have the problems like in Ecuador. We don't have surface water, so we have our water supply almost all around here the same, because we take it directly from the ground. Very little of our sources is surface water, so we have another problem. We have to keep the water, some of it from the winter to the summer, but we have a regular supply all the months, almost the same quality. Something that is very unique to our state in general, Israel and Beit Shan Valley specifically, that the water is part of the government management. So it's not everyone take the water that close to him. the government in general and the regional council specifically in our area is management the water and share it to every settlement, everyone according to his ground to make agriculture, and not everyone that take the water or the spring that near to him, and then in the next one don't get water. Last thing I want to express is sewage water. Sewage water from us is a treasure. It's a treasure. It's not a threat, it's a treasure, because sewage water was before drinking water. So it's the most sweet, it's the most sweet water in the area, going to drinking water and become sewage water. In Israel, we learn how to treat the water and bring them back to agriculture use. More than 80% of the sewage water in Israel as a whole, and in our region, almost 100% of the sewage water are treated and become sweet water for agriculture. So it's written here, too dirty, for us, it's not too dirty. It's never too dirty. We see as a blessing, as much people they're taking. I'm generally a farmer, but from us, if the population take the sweet water for the home, we get it later as a treated sewage water. So as I said, it's not a threat, it's a treasure, and we make very good things about it. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much. Sewage water being a gift is a very interesting concept. Boris, welcome back. I'd love if you're comfortable with picking up from where you left off. You were giving a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. But I would like you to tell me when I disconnected.
I remember we were on a map of like the reds, yellows. We had just started to talk about how much water a natural system can manage, and then you vanished from us.
Yeah. Okay. So probably because my internet connection seems to be unstable, I will just not use this slide. So yes, the problem for Lima is that there is too much water during the rainy season that lasts for 3-4 months, and too little water during the dry season that is a very long period of 7 to 8 months. So what the city does is they use the water from the rivers that originate in the mountains, but they also do water transfers from the Amazon in order to complement that amount of water. And still there is a lag of 43 million cubic of water for the city during the dry season. So these basins that give the water to Lima are one of the most human intervened basins in Latin America, and certainly the most human managed basin in Peru. So what we are arguing there is that to combine gray infrastructure, the infrastructure that we use as civil engineers, with natural infrastructure, the nature-based solutions that Polona was also mentioning, for example, and to have this as a complement. It's not really a scenario of putting gray infrastructure against green infrastructure, but how they can complement each other. So in one of those cases, we found a very interesting experience from the communities that live in the mountains in the Andes, in which they actually use these water harvesting systems. So they've been managing water in the mountains for centuries. There is a system that is called amunas, that is Quechua language for to hold the water, or mamanteo, which is Spanish for breastfeeding. So what they actually do is they take the water during the rainy season, they divert the water from the streams to infiltration areas. They let the water infiltrate in the soils, and they actually use the soils as natural reservoirs of water. So in doing so, water will travel much slower throughout the soil, within the soil, than it does over the surface. So instead of having the rainy season water peaking after 2 months, they can store the water for a few more months, and then they have water available for the dry season. So they actually are creating a bridge between the rainy season that is very short and where there is too much water to the dry season that is very long when they have too little water. What we did after that is to really see if this experience that is just a point in the map can extrapolate to provide water to a 12 million city, like 12 million people city like Lima. So we generate a simulation model and we tested what if we can replicate the system and really leverage the role of natural infrastructure, nature-based solutions, and these ancient technologies for a city like Lima. And we found that it is actually possible to provide an additional 1 cubic meters for the city, which is twice what they actually lack to cope with water demand during the dry season, and that can complement already with the available capacity that Lima has with the gray infrastructure. So it is really this experience of trying to complement and trying to have these different solutions. As I say, like we always talk about this gray infrastructure, green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, and we give all these colors to these different options. And I think that instead of having just to choose between one of them, what we can do is to have all these, not to put our eggs in the same basket, or if we want to give them colors, we can have actually an Easter egg basket with all these different options possible.
I think from what I've learned over the last decade or so, I think you're right on point, Boris, and the rest of you with, touching on, just using a variety of things to manage our freshwater resources. We are going to need water forever. And climate change is creating a lot of unpredictable situations for us. And I think the better mix of technology and nature-based solutions and adaptations of our gray infrastructure, the better. It makes us more flexible and resilient for the future. Now I'd like to come back to each of you with some follow-up questions, unless I'm missing anything in the audience. But Commissioner, I'd love to come back to you and talk about two things. We didn't really talk about so much drinking water delivery and how that happens in a city like Cleveland with 100-year-old infrastructure. Can you talk about that process and how intensive it is? Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry about that, Erin. So yeah, we are a very urban city, as you indicate. We were started in 1856. So we do have some water mains. We have some infrastructure well over 100 years old now. A lot of debate and discussion in the industry about what is the life of a water main, for example. And I don't know that there's true universal acceptance of that, especially among those who really practice in that area. We serve 1.4 million people in the region, 10th largest water system in the country by that measure. And we have 5,300 water mains, 440,000 accounts in the system, 70,000 hydrants, 85,000 valves, on and on that we could go with all of the metrics. It is a system designed with, at least here, there's a lot of discussion right now, and the US EPA is putting an emphasis on resilience, the ability to bounce back in case some upset condition does occur. And that has been a hallmark of ours here, at least for a long time. The fact that demand has gone down, as I indicated, as population has decreased somewhat in the area and as industrial has decreased, it has given us the opportunity to use the assets that we have to build in reliability and redundancy into the system. We take an approach that we should be able to withstand losing any single big thing from our system, a pump station, a transmission main, a water tower, and still survive and still bring water to everybody. So we have done that successfully. We have 4 large water treatment plants, and because of the strength of the transmission system, we've at times taken down an entire plant for weeks at a time while we do work there. So it is a challenge to us. Every water system in the country would love to be able to spend more money on renewing their infrastructure. As we say, we've got water mains, some of them more than 100 years old. We are aggressive. Almost 40% of our capital dollars now go to reinvestment in the distribution system, in renewing that buried infrastructure that's been out of sight, out of mind to a large extent in many ways. You know, another legacy of an old system like ours, certainly front and center, that many water systems have to think about, is lead. We have, of the 440,000 connections, over 100,000 of them are still legacy lead connections. For over 20 years, we add orthophosphate, a chemical addition to the water, in order to coat those connections, and our lead numbers are way below what federal standards are. Nevertheless, there is almost a growing sentiment, it seems, out in the water industry to do more to simply remove those lead lines. And the cost of doing that is what the major challenge is. Here in Cleveland, we estimate to get rid of all the lead connections, it's going to be maybe $700 million to do that. I don't know that anybody has figured out how to pay for that in as quick a way as everybody would like to see it. So I think that's just something that that the entire country and the industry, those in older systems that have that issue, are going to continue to look at and try and figure out with time.
Thank you. And again, being in my hometown, I could listen to you all day and talk to you all day about water issues here, but we're here with the world today, which is so exciting. I'd love to move over to Polona. The work that I've specifically been involved with in East Africa, and most currently even with Cleveland Water and others here, is in the water equity space, and the importance of when you're making improvements to systems or programs or building projects or solutions and involving stakeholders is so critical to sustainability. I'd love to hear more about how you were able to drive and prioritize that process, especially with the people funding you. And two, if you learned anything interesting that you were surprised about.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. This was also a learning experience for us. We did the process with our colleagues and friends from Italy who are working specifically in risk perception research. And basically what we did was we knew what we wanted to do, and then we went out and we talked to stakeholders, asking them what they want to do. So what kind of issues do they identify in the catchment? We didn't say we're going to do flood management. We just went out there and asked, so what kind of problems do you see? And eventually, because it's true, the flood risk was the main problem, but they also identified the lack of recreational areas and the lack of green areas and the diminishing biodiversity that's happening in the catchment. And so together with them, we then said, okay, so we want to be protected from floods, but at the same time, we want to enhance our environment. And on that note, we went back to the stakeholders and asked them, okay, so how do you imagine we do this? And again, we collected input from them. So each step that we usually do as researchers or planners, we first went to the stakeholders and asked them what they want to do and how they see the problem or the solution. And then we tried to integrate this into our research findings and our plans. And then we went back to them, presented our suggestions, and they were able to comment and they were able to suggest changes and adaptations because they very well know their catchment. The farmers suggested where and what they could do because they don't use some of their land. The residents were saying, but this is not useful for us because we don't need this area or something like that. So I think the most important thing is just to listen to them and to present what you are suggesting in each step that you normally take, and then integrate their answers into what you're doing. And what was very interesting, and for me the most inspiring, is that in the end, because of this process, people felt connected to the solutions and they accepted them. Because usually there's another project that is going on right now and it has a huge public outcry against it. They're building some kind of a sewer system in the municipality of Ljubljana, and everybody is against it because nobody was included in the preparation phase of this. Nobody was able to contribute with their problems, with their suggestions for this project, and our was, on the contrary, accepted by basically all stakeholders that cooperated. And so I think this is very important for the managers, for the municipalities, to start working with the people.
I completely agree. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm going to move over to Ran Ben-Un now, and I'd love to ask you more about this sweet resource that you were talking about. I know that 80% of sewage in the world goes into the environment untreated, and that it's a huge issue for the world. So can you talk more about how you end up using this waste, as most of us see it, into being extremely useful?
Because Israel in general is on the border of the desert. In general, we are a dry country. And now, in general in Israel, more than half of the drinking water is desalination from the Mediterranean Sea. So it's very expensive, our drinking water. So this is a source of water we cannot allow to waste it. First of all, if we put it back to the sea, we have to drink it again, first of all. But this is not the reason. We don't have enough water. And instead of desalination water for agriculture, we use it from the cities, from the sewage water of the population. And because sewage water of the population is a very reliable source of water, the people always have, the government will not desalinate desalination water from the sea to agriculture. The agriculture cannot allow to pay it, and the government will not do it. But for the population, for sure, they will do it. Actually, Israelis desalination water, not directly, but by the way, also for the Palestinian Authority and for Jordan Kingdom. And we are, in these days, really in these days, Israel is building a new desalination water north to Haifa, and a big pipe that will take desalination water from the Mediterranean and put it into the Sea of Galilee, instead to be able to give this water to the Jordan Kingdom. They don't have sea, and they don't have money and the opportunity to desalination water. So in this organization, sewage water is really a source, a sweet source, and every city, every municipality in Israel is forced by the law to treat its own wastewater. Every municipality by the law must do it, and the treatment sewage water is belong to the cities, to the municipality, not to the farmers, to the agriculture, to the cities. And that's become more than half of the sweet water of agriculture in Israel is become from this sewage water, and the other half is become from surface water or from other source of water. So it's become from a necessary, and it's become advantage, and we do it the maximum that we can. The maximum that we can, not because it's become not popular to say, not because we are caring out about the environment. We are caring about ourselves. The environment, of course, is earned it big time.
Thank you so much. And the commissioner and I were in Israel a few years ago on a water technology tour, and we were so. I feel like if Israeli technology and also some of the solutions that are being come up with in such a dry looking area, if those were spread across the world, we could really solve some problems. Of course, coupled with some natural solutions, right, Boris? I'm coming to you next with our last question before we have our closeout question. I know we didn't talk about this before, so I hope I'm not blindsiding you too much, but you talked about having the deficit of water in the dry season, and I didn't really understand how water was distributed, drinking water was distributed throughout Lima. And I'd love to, if you're able to talk about this, learn more about how that distribution happens, at least a high level overview, and if it's affecting people inequitably. For instance, in the US, we've had a lot of conversations about water equity issues, especially lately, and poor communities not having access to drinking water or safe drinking water sometimes. And so I'd love to hear more from you. When it dries up, what happens and who gets affected?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erin, because I think water equity is really an issue, and it's not only with water, but with other socioeconomic factors as well. Lima is a very unequal city. It is 12 million people and not all of them are connected to the water network. So it is usually the richer neighborhoods, the ones that have the connection to all the water pipes and all the water infrastructure, which also means that water is going to be cheaper as a the salary that they can earn. But the poorer people are usually located in areas that don't have access to water. So they need to get the water from tanks, which also makes it more expensive as a proportion of the income that they receive. So this is really an issue, because the water deficit that we are talking about is only the water deficit that is accounted in the water network, but not really considering the entire deficit of water that the city of Lima has. And one of the most interesting aspects of water equity is also gender issues. For example, not only in the city, but in the rural areas that are in the water sources of the city, we can see that, for example, women, they are only allowed to have less than 15% of the decision making related to water, but they are the ones who are investing 80 hours per in working, like 40 hours that they usually invest in a job, let's say, and another 40 hours that they invest in household activities, whereas men only invest 50 hours per week. So, for example, these are aspects that are really important, because even for local communities in Peru and in other ancient Latin American cultures, women are usually the ones that are considered the guardians of water and the guardians of ecosystems. But we can see that now in the system that is not really working. So I think we really need to work hard on water equity and access to water for both kind of inequalities that we experience right now.
Thank you so much for that. And in order not to rush you with one last question, I'll ask if any one of you has anything burning that you would love to say before we close out our session. All right. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody virtually to Cleveland, Ohio. You're welcome anytime, and I hope to meet all of you in person at some point. I'd also like to thank our sponsors once again: Platform Brewery, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Supply Side Group, Ulmer and Byrne, Rotary Club of Cleveland, Eaton, Taiwan Sister Cities, SIP USA, Margaret Wong and Associates, Team Neo, Peace Corps, and 12 Literary Arts. In the audience, you'll be able to join our networking room and interact with other participants of the conference. Please check out our virtual sponsor booths or continue the conversation in the chat. Thank you for attending. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
It was wonderful talking with all of you. Thank you so much for lending your valuable time. And I wish I could give you all a big hug for the work that you do. What you all do is amazing. You inspired me.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to share this with everybody. Thanks everybody for listening. It's great to have the opportunity to share, but at the same time to hear what other people are working on, how they're finding solutions. Very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Very well done, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The internet connection.
Oh, that's okay. What's a virtual event without some tech issues?
Exactly. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for everyone who joined us today for our Freshwater panel, and we hope to see you at some of our other panels later today and this week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.